We begin, first of all, with Gottschalk, who lived from 805 to 869. And Gottschalk was, when he was born, was taken by his father and presented to a Benedictine monastery as what was called an oblate. Oblates were often children, most often children, but not always, who were presented to the monastery, who were not going to enter the monastery as monks, but who rather would live in the context of that monastery under the influence, of course, of the monks. As Gottschalk grew, he wanted to get out of the monastery very badly. You could imagine, I don't know this for sure, but I would imagine around 13, 14 years old, he was really itching to get out of the monastery. He wanted to get out so bad, and he made such a stink that they transferred him to a less strict monastery, to a place called Orbais. And then he began there studying the Apostle Paul, the writings of Paul in the New Testament, and St. Augustine. And it was through Gottschalk's study of Paul and Augustine that he became a very firm believer in election and God's predestinating purpose over all things. In fact, Gottschalk became, quote, reformed long before the Reformation. Gottschalk, as a result, began to teach these things, and also not only began teaching God's sovereign purpose, predestination, election, and so forth, but he also began to very straightforwardly oppose the semi-Pelagianism of the Catholic Church at that time. And so it was really, Gottschalk began to exercise a double-pronged ministry, as it were. And you might remember that the Catholic Church at the Council of Orange had refuted Pelagianism and had adopted a form of Augustinianism that we could call semi-Augustinianism. Well, over time, semi-Augustinianism evolved into semi-Pelagianism. And if you can think of that theological spectrum, Pelagianism on one side, Augustinianism on the other, and the two semis coming closer together, it was just simply a matter of time before the church was immersed in a semi-Pelagian view that was heretical. Gottschalk opposed that with great vehemence. As a result, Gottschalk was persecuted severely for his teaching of the sovereignty of God and predestination, and for his opposition to semi-Pelagianism. When Gottschalk reached the end of his life, he was tried as a heretic for his teachings. He was defrocked, he was flogged, and he was imprisoned, living out the last 20 years of his life in prison. Now, just a little note from the Catholic Encyclopedia. He was then imprisoned for life in the monastery, where he died both obstinate and mentally deranged after an imprisonment of about 20 years. Most of Gottschalk's writings have been lost. Now, let me just say one word about Gottschalk's so-called mental derangement. Gottschalk did become what some people would call mentally ill during those 20 years, but that was due primarily to the incredible deprivations that he experienced in prison. And so here we have a man living from 805 to 869 who was, in a sense, a torchbearer for God's sovereign purposes, and he paid the consequences for it.